Hello, I'm cheap and I like to do things myself, and I made some bunting for my own wedding. Here's how it went. I first did some calculations and figured out we wanted 15 metres of bunting for the garden it was decorating, and I estimated how much fabric I'd need for that. From my research, I have since gathered that these triangles are called pennants. So I ordered 3 different types of lacy fabric for the pennants, 1 metre each, and one 15 metre length of bias binding for the bunting string. This cost me £31.32. I made myself a thick cardboard template for my pennants using some rough measurements I found online. When the fabric arrived, I swiftly found out that my fabric scissors are not sharp at all. For ages I needed an excuse to buy myself a rotary cutter, so I finally did. It cost me £8 from my local haberdashery. I am a fairly impatient person and I insisted on cutting multiple pennants at a time. Each of my 3 fabrics was a slightly different width and thickness, but I folded them up as neatly as I possibly could, which honestly is not that neat, and sliced myself up 4 or 6 pennants at a time. I don't know how many times I sliced through the fabric and a little bit my template and the tiniest bit my hand, but it definitely took a toll. By the end of all this pennant cutting, the blade was nowhere near as sharp, and at one point the rotary cutter actually fell apart. It wasn't that dramatic, I just screwed the nuts and washers back on. And I absolutely wrecked my cutting mat, which was also previously unused. I think the tape from the template also made it worse, making it more sticky, and it's kind of gross and unusable now, to be honest. Onto the pinning of my pennants, which was all fine and dandy until I ran out of pins, so I started to sew. I put the pins on in the wrong direction, so I started sewing from the middle of the string because I was too lazy to redo all the pins. This was a mistake. At this point I should mention that I'm not a seamstress or a sewer, and this is my mum's sewing machine, which I used once or twice before. This sewing machine caused me about 2 hours of stress because I didn't know what I was doing and I barely know how these machines work at all, so of course I messed up a lot, and every mess up here was right in the middle of the bunting, and I wanted one long continuous string of bunting to decorate with. There was a lot of unpicking and stressing. I had the settings wrong, so I spent a lot of time changing every single setting a minuscule amount and testing it until I got it perfect with, no loops, no tangles, no more tears, no nasty knots. It was a lot of unnecessary stress I caused myself. Anyway, I eventually figured it out and then speedily sewed through all the bunting, again still stupidly working from the middle. It was a bit of a day, to be honest, so I left it here and came back the following morning and pinned and sewed the rest. Unfortunately, I had too much confidence in my math skills and unsurprisingly, I got the calculations wrong. I made 15 metres of bunting and I still had 133 pennants left somehow. Well, one of the fabrics only had 33 left, so we had 99 pennants to work with, keeping the pattern of the 3 alternating fabrics. So, of course, I just had to order more bias binding to use the rest of these triangles and have much more bunting. I got my almost husband to check my maths and he calculated 18 metres instead of my 16 metres that was needed. I had to wait for it to be back in stock, but I ordered another 18 metres for £14.41. This time I had to pay the £1.99 delivery fee too. When it arrived, I got straight to it. I had to look up a YouTube video on how to connect bias binding seamlessly, and it would have worked amazingly had someone else done it. The method was there, but the accuracy was not. Just don't look too closely and it's fine. So as you can see, I pinned as many pennants onto it before I ran out of pins, then I immediately ran out of bobbin thread. So I filled that bobbin up. And then disaster struck because it did that weird loopy thing on the back again. And I spent a whole hour trying to figure this out, changing all the settings, tiny amounts, and just, trial and error again. The same things I'd done before with changing the settings, but this time I did learn a little bit from my previous mistakes, and I used a bit of scrap fabric on the end to figure it all out, after ruining a couple triangles in the centre of course. And after an hour or so I ran out of thread again, and I didn't feel like I used it that much because most of my time was spent unpicking and changing the settings, so I filled up the bobbin again and then the sewing was perfect. So was this my original issue? Did I waste hours of my time when I should have just fixed the bobbin? Why did no one tell me? Anyway, because of all that I ran out of time and couldn't finish on the same day. But the following day I finally finished the bunting. All 33 metres of it. The second set of maths my almost husband did was thankfully spot on. I am glad I went by his calculations and not my own. Yet another reason to marry this intelligent man. It turned out great though, I love it, and I made such a ridiculous amount. I really don't think it's all going to get put up. The garden it's going in is not that big. I'm pretty sure I made too much, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Hopefully one day we'll use this just for day-to-day decorations in our house or garden. Maybe a bit too fancy for just day-to-day, but anyway, this was a fun learning process for me. It took me 10 hours in total, by the way. Probably about 90% of that time was just unpicking my mistakes. And in total, for all my bunting, I spent £45.73. Bargain. But now, I just need to get married. I'm cooking 90% of the wedding food myself, by the way, because weddings aren't stressful enough. Happy bunting!